All right, welcome back. So today is Monday, and I'm going to go over your assignment in this video, give you a couple quick tips on analyzing poetry, and I will actually read the poem out loud to you, so that might help for some of you who maybe like to be read to versus reading on your own. So today's essential questions, so keep these in the back of your head as you do the work for today. What is identity? To what extent can we determine our own identities? What influence does society have? So those are kind of the big overarching questions I want you to be thinking about while you're doing today's assignment. So before we get into the assignment, a few quick tips for reading poetry. Poetry is one of those things people generally love or hate, and usually if people hate it, it's because it's hard to understand. There's hidden meanings, there's figurative language. Poetry is not as straightforward as, an article or a book or, a newsletter or anything like that. So poetry is hard to do, but I've got a few tips that will hopefully help you in breaking down this poem and any poem. You could apply these tips to any poem that you read. So this first tip is dwell in the difficult. And this is something that nobody told me about until I was in college. I was taking a women's literature class and we were reading some poetry, and our professor would say this over and over and over: dwell in the difficult. And it made a lot of sense to me when she explained what she meant. And I was kind of like, man, I wish somebody would have told me that. But what this means is, if you're reading the poem and you're plugging and chugging along and you're like, yeah, I'm understanding what this means, and then you get to a part and you're like, okay, they lost me. No idea what they're talking about. I don't know what they mean here. You've hit a difficult spot in the poem. That generally means it's important. So you want to dwell in that difficult spot. You want to stop, take a moment, read it again, really break it down and figure out what the author is trying to say, because if there's something in the poem that is difficult to understand, it's complex, it's confusing, that means it's important. So you want to dwell in the difficult. Don't just move right past it and say, oh, I didn't understand, I'm just going to keep going and hopefully I can figure it out. If you read it and you're confused, you need to pause, reread, dwell in that difficult spot, and see if you can figure it out. So that's tip 1. Tip 2 is find the figurative language. Poetry, a lot of people hate it because it is full of figurative language, but that's a good thing. Figurative language is beautiful. And figurative language always adds some sort of meaning. So find that figurative language and again, dwell in that. See if you can figure out what the author means by that. And then finally, listen for repetition. Anything that is repeated in a poem is repeated for a reason, and it's usually to draw some emphasis towards that. It's usually going to be something that's an important idea in that poem. Otherwise, they wouldn't have repeated it, right? If you're repeating yourself, it usually means whatever it is you're saying is worth repeating, so it's an important idea. So those are a few tips for reading poetry. Dwell on the difficult, find that figurative language, and listen for repetition. Okay. So now I'm going to go to your assignments for today. So again, Google Classroom. Again, classwork, not stream. And you're going to look for To Kill a Mockingbird, and we are on Monday. So I've broken it down by step by step what you need to do. So first, you're going to watch the video of me discussing the poem, explaining the assignment. That's what we're doing right now. Number 2, you're going to read the poem, Two Names, Two Worlds. So that's this first PDF. You'll do the Google form and complete the questions. That's this one. And then you'll create an identity chart for Jonathan Rodriguez on the Google Doc. And I will go into a little bit more detail about that because that's probably the most confusing part. So let's start with the poem. So you'll click on it and you will see this: Two Names, Two Worlds. And so if you see something at the top, that's always important to read. So in the poem below, student Jonathan Rodriguez reflects on how his name represents his identity. So this is going back to that big question of what is identity? So I'm going to go ahead and read this to you. I would suggest following along. And again, anytime something difficult comes across, pause. You can pause this video right where you are, think about it, reread it if you need to, and then we'll keep on moving. Hi, I'm John. No, Jonathan. Wait, Jonathan Rodriguez. Hold on, Jonathan Rodriguez. My name, two names, two worlds. The duality of my identity, like two sides of the same coin, with two worlds, there should be plenty of room. But where do I fit? Where can I sit? Is this seat taken? Or is that seat taken? There is never quite enough room, is there? Two names, two worlds. Where do I come from? Born in the Washington Heights of New York City, but raised in good old Connecticut. The smell of freshly mowed grass, autumn leaves, sancocho, rice, and beans. The sound from Billy Joel's piano keys, and the rhythm from Juan Luis Guerra, and from the struggle for broken dreams, of false promises, of houses with white picket fences, and 2.5 kids. And mountains and Campos de la República Dominicana, and the mango trees. I'm not the typical kid from suburbia, nor am I a smooth Latin cat. My head's in the clouds, my nose in a comic book. I get lost in the stories and art. I'm kind of awkward, so talking to the ladies is hard. I listen to Fernanda, Villano, and Adventura every chance I get, but don't make me dance merengue, bachata, or salsa. I don't know the steps. I've learned throughout these past years. I am a mix of cultures, a mix of races. Una raza incidida, negra, blanca, haitiana. You can find me in the parts of a song, en una canción. You can feel my African roots, in la tambora. My Teano screams in la guerra, and the melodies of the lyrics are a reminder of my beautiful Spanish heritage. I am African, Teano, and Spanish. A fanboy, an athlete, a nerd, a student and introvert. I'm proud to say, yo soy dominicano. I'm proud to say, I am me. I am beginning to appreciate that I am una bella mezcla. I am beginning to see that this world is also a beautiful mix of people, ideas, and stories. Is this seat taken? Or is that seat taken? Join me and take a seat. Here, we'll write our own stories. Alright, so hopefully you paused the video through that, went back and reread, and tried to figure out some of these things. But I'm going to kind of do a quick overview just of some of the most difficult things. Obviously, the number one most difficult thing is if you don't know Spanish, you were probably like, I don't know what some of these words mean. Anything that was italicized was Spanish. So for example, oh no, there we go. So for example, sancocho, rice and beans. That's Spanish, that's English. Juan Luis Guerra, I don't know who that is, but you can assume from the rhythm that he's some sort of musician. And then down here, when you get these little boxes, those are your best friends because those are telling you what it means. You don't even have to figure it out for yourself. So for example, una raza encendida, negra, blanca y haitiana. And if any of you speak Spanish and I'm completely butchering this, I apologize because I do not speak Spanish, but I'm doing my best. But what this means, what he's saying, is a race that is black, white, and Teano. So he is a mix of these three different races. Here again it tells us en una canción, that means a song. Here again, en la tambora, that's a percussion instrument, so some sort of drum probably. And then I'm proud to say yo soy dominicano. I'm proud to say I am Dominican. I'm proud to say I am me. I'm beginning to appreciate that I am a beautiful blend. I'm beginning to see that this world is also a beautiful mix of people, ideas, and stories. So this poem really is talking about how he is this mix of things, and I love when he goes into all the different parts of himself that make up his identity. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I'm African, I'm Teano, I'm Spanish, I'm a fanboy, I'm an athlete, I'm a nerd, I'm a student, I'm an introvert. He's a Dominican, he's me. I love that part. So the next part of your assignment, you will see these connection questions here at the bottom. Obviously, you can't write on this. There's no room, but that's why it's in a Google form. So you can get off of the PDF, or you might want to leave it pulled up so you can toggle back and forth between the two. But you'll go to this Google form, and you'll see two names, two world connection questions. So it's the same questions that are on the worksheet. I just put it in a Google form so it's more user-friendly. So number one, what does Rodriguez mean? And that's just the author. When he uses the phrase, two names, two worlds. what two worlds does his name represent? Number 2, what assumptions does Rodriguez think others might make about his identity because of his name? He talks about a couple things. He's like, I don't do this, I can't do this, that people might assume he can do. And then which of those assumptions are true and which are false? And then the next one, what does your name suggest about your identity? So connecting it to yourself. So a text to self connection. What does your name suggest about your identity? To what extent does it influence how others think about you? And how does it affect how you think about yourself? So you could think about your first name, your last name. You could even think about a nickname, maybe something that you were called when you were little. Any sort of name that you have, what might it suggest about your identity, about who you really are? And then finally, just what's your first and last name so that I can make sure you're getting graded for this. I think that it sends me your email, but I usually just ask for your name anyway, just in case. And then on assignments like this, click send me a copy. Always click send me a copy. That way, in case anything happens, you've got that copy that shows, hey, I did this and I can show you. Also because if we go over this, if I have, like a discussion about it, that way you'll have a copy to pull up so you don't have to be like, oh, I don't even remember what I put for that. You'll have it in front of you. So always send me a copy and then submit. Then you're good to go with that. And then the last part of the assignment, you're going to create an identity chart for Jonathan Rodriguez on the Google Doc. And so you'll click on this, creating identity charts. Two names, two worlds. So instructions are here. Create an identity chart for Rodriguez. Again, that's the author, the guy who's talking, using evidence from the text. So that's going back to our learning target that we talked about yesterday, always using textual evidence. So to do this, first type the name of the author, then look through the text for evidence that helps them answer the question, who is this person? Who is he? Who's this person? Make sure to include quotes from the text on your identity charts, as well as your own interpretations based on your reading. And you want to aim for at least 10 different traits, 10 identity traits. And I've given you an example here, but I want you to note that your chart does not have to look like this example. You can make it look like this if you're really good at Google Docs and you know how to do the shapes and the lines and all of that. But it doesn't need to be that complicated if you don't want it to be. You can just do a list if you'd rather. You can just put his name and then type the characteristics underneath like a list. But this is the example. So this identity chart is for somebody named Stephanie, and they have included a bunch of different identity traits, more than 10, but I'm just asking for 10, that really answer that question, who is Stephanie? So for example, she's female, she's American, not entirely American. So where you see that it's in quotes, that means that is a quote from something else. So if this was a text, if we had read a text about Stephanie, you would have seen this, not entirely American. That's a quote from the text. So that's what I'm asking you to do as well. So for example, for our author here, you could say he's male. You could say, you could use that quote, yo soy dominicano, I'm a Dominican, right? And that's a direct text or direct quote from the text. That's textual evidence. That's what I'm talking about. Survivor, daughter, granddaughter, immigrant, a bunch of different things here. Here's another one. Me and my brother are like two sides of the same coin. That's another quote from the text. But notice you have to use quotation marks if it's directly from the text. So if you were using that yo soy dominicano, it has to be in those quotation marks always. So here's an example for you. But again, your identity chart is going to be for Rodriguez, the guy we just read about. So you will write right on this Google Doc. There should be one for everybody in the class, so you shouldn't have to worry about that. But again, if you want to play around with the formatting and make it look like this, feel free. If you don't, then you can just do a list. So let me pull up the poem here. Jonathan Rodriguez. And then you can underline it, you don't have to. But then if you want to do a list, you can just like do like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you can just list out those identity traits that you find. And so I will go ahead and erase that.